Yo, 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 what's good? Salutations to the nations. It's your boy Young Sinai, and this is my first time going live. So I definitely expected to have some technical difficulties. So bear with me. But I'm gonna be checking out some videos that I've been wanting to check out for a little bit now. And hopefully y'all will tune in with me. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so this video is big companies hate retro gaming.
Across the games industry to compensate for rampant budgetary overspending in publishing, the reality behind keeping retro games within a paid walled garden is about charging new money for old rope and controlling the market to force gamers to play new games. The specific quote is that, quote, there would be a significant risk that preserved video games would be used for recreational purposes. This explains why people like Jim Ryan hate retro games. They think these older games would cannibalize sales from newer releases. Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Hard Light Network. So, for those of you who have followed my channel for any period of time, you know that it's no secret that the industry hates retro games. Not only do these companies eventually stop seeing royalty payments from physical copies of these games, but larger companies like Nintendo have outright stated that retro gaming actually hurts innovation, somehow. Over the last few months, we've covered
Retro gaming hurts innovation. Well, that's definitely not true because um there have definitely been developers who have referenced old games inspiring their new games. Hence uh Concerned Ape and Stardew Valley, right? Let me check that out. Hold on. Concern. Yeah. What am I looking up? I don't have to look that up. We know that's true, right? There's been other stories about that as well, like um Undertale. I believe that was like inspired by Earthbound and stuff. I could be wrong about that, but
multiple instances of classic
Nintendo's just greedy, man. Like I hate Nintendo. I love Nintendo and I hate Nintendo at the same time.
titles being delisted, as well as legal action aimed directly at targeting games preservation. During this time, massive companies have gone completely mask off as they have utterly disregarded the effects their actions could have on their customer base moving forward. But there's one not so subtle reason for why companies are behaving this way, and I'm sure that it's not going to surprise anyone here. The struggle for games preservation has gotten pretty bleak, and honestly, it feels like we're at a tipping point. If we don't do something now, we're probably going to lose dozens, if not hundreds, of classic titles to the sands of time. As gamers, if we care,
They say that I think what was it? I think 80 or 85% of all gaming history has already been lost to time. If it wasn't for emulation, of course.
about the culture and the community that we've built up around these titles over the last 40 years, it's time for us to make a stand and refuse to allow these corporations to mask their greed with a thin layer of pretense. I've got a short article for you guys today, but there's honestly a much more important message on the back end of this video. So please, before we get into it, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the content I've got coming up for you guys in the future, and also hit the comment section down below to encourage this video to grow in the algorithm and spread the message. Regardless of where you land on some of the specifics of this issue, I don't think anybody watching my videos wants to see these classic titles disappear forever. Whether you're a collector, a developer, or just an average gamer, your input goes a long way to improving this channel as well as helping us grow towards our goal of games preservation. That being said, if you wanted to go the extra mile, there is a super thanks option below, but with all of that out of the way, let's get into this article. Today's reading comes to us from Forbes and is entitled Publishers Have Finally Said the Quiet Part Out Loud About Retro Games. And it begins as follows. In a recent move against the archiving of video game history, publishers have finally come clean on why they dislike retro games so much. The recent legal case regarding the archiving of video games, which was helpfully collated at Games Radar, is finally over. Unfortunately, the final ruling is firmly against making gaming history available to all. This is an obviously awful and sad move culturally, but it will also affect people who will want to make games in the future. After all, imagine not being able to go to the library and read the works of Charles Dickens, E.M. Forster, or any other historical author. Without ready access to the history of literature, what could anyone hope for its future? Likewise with games, we all need access to the formative titles that have shaped the medium. They are akin to being required reading before you even step into the world of actually making games. However, the motivation behind this protectionism is profoundly disappointing. Again, it comes from the festering den of
Why is gaming seen as such a different medium and form of entertainment than books or movies? Like, why doesn't it get the respect that it deserves in those regards? Um, you can pretty much find any movie, any song from any time period that you want, just about. But video games, we have to jump through all of these hoops just to keep the history. And the thing is that at some point, every game will become a retro game. So I don't care if it's Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, um, you know, I'm sorry, Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, or Breath of the Wild. Everything's gonna become retro. So you mean to tell me 50 years from now, people aren't going to be able to access that game to know what it was like to inspire them to create a new game?
Iniquity Games Publishing. And below you can actually see a response to the recent legal decision against games preservation from Frank Cifaldi, the founder and director of the Video Game History Foundation. And if you want to see more information on his response, as well as information about the Video Game History Foundation and the legal decision that was leveled against games preservation, you can actually check out my video, It's Over for Games Preservation. I go into a little more detail there, but this video has a slightly different focus. The article continues by stating, what with all the layoffs across the games industry to compensate for rampant budgetary overspending in publishing, the reality behind keeping retro games within a paid walled garden is about charging new money for old rope, and controlling the market to force gamers to play new games. The specific quote is that, quote, there would be a significant risk that preserved video games would be used for recreational purposes. This explains why people like Jim Ryan hate retro games. They think these older games would cannibalize sales from newer releases. We've had over a decade to prove that AAA games are not viable in a business sense. The budgets and returns are not sustainable. However, to get these massive budgets off the ground, the industry effectively eliminated mid-tier games. These mid-tier games are what kept the medium alive and allowed it to flourish, simply because there was a greater amount of functional variety to cater to people's disparate tastes. Retro games are also part of this cultural ecosystem, and they are now off limits and gatekept by clearly inept and greedy publishers. Today is a sad day for gaming, but in some sense, the openly brazen attitude of publishers is definitely something the gaming community won't forget in a hurry. I've said it before, and I'll certainly say it many more times, but there's nothing like good old-fashioned corporate greed, with money being funneled directly over to the corporate fat cats at publishing, while developers suffer the consequences, adding insult to injury by being laid off.
Here's the problem: you need to make good games, okay? You need to make good games. If you made good games, then you wouldn't be so worried about people loving the old games so much that they're not buying the new games. No, just make good games and people will play the old games and they'll play the new games. It's not rocket science. They're intimidated by the old games. That's what it is, because the old games are freaking classics. And all of this AAA garbage that they're just putting out right now can't compete. That's the problem.
Off during the holiday season. Yesterday's revolutionaries have become today's tyrants, so to speak, as these corporations which used to put out creative, thoughtful, and unique experiences have become bloated and lazy as they rest on their laurels and exploit the very customer base that brought
Yeah,
up their
that's exactly
success.
what I'm saying.
But to tell you the absolute truth, gamers are not completely off the hook, and we're not free from blame either, as we continue to consume whatever slop they funnel down the pipeline. It's hard to pinpoint when exactly the games industry started to go to crap. Maybe it was with horse armor, or maybe it began with annual releases. But one thing is for certain, gamers have enabled these companies for far too long. The question that remains is, do these companies deserve to persevere despite bringing us garbage products for years just because of the quality of the products that they used to provide us back in the day? Exactly how many times can the nostalgia ticket be cashed in before it loses all value? I mean, sure, remasters and re releases are great when they actually work, but companies like Steam have actually put out copies of games that don't even function and still manage to make money off of them. Recently, I went out of my way to purchase 2 physical copies of games that were for sale on Steam's marketplace but didn't actually function. The first was one of these mid tier games
Yeah, see,
mentioned in the article, a title that many people
he bought the physical game and the physical game didn't even function. It's a scam. They'll sell you like half of a game, 2/3 of a game. That's like imagine going to McDonald's and they sell you uh 3/4 of your hamburger, and like, yeah, you gotta download the rest. That's what they're doing to us. It's just as ridiculous.
didn't like, but I actually had a soft spot for Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. Sure, the story wasn't great and the multiplayer was hot garbage, but I had tons of fun blasting through hordes of zombies with unique Umbrella operatives. And maybe it was because of the game's lackluster reception that Steam was able to get away with selling broken copies of the game. But the other title, Splinter Cell Conviction, really shouldn't have had any excuse for being a broken port. It was an incredibly strong entry into the Splinter Cell franchise and was received phenomenally well when it launched, so I was genuinely surprised when the Steam port was broken beyond playability. Despite the fact that both copies of these games were completely unplayable, they sat on Steam's marketplace for years before being quietly removed. But that was just a standalone version.
The good thing about Steam though is they do have a great return policy. So if he had any issues with Steam, he should be able to get his money back, no problem.
Version of the game, as you can still purchase Splinter Cell Conviction through the Echelon Edition bundle on Steam Marketplace for $40. However, the port is still broken and multiplayers have been shut down by Ubisoft, making the game virtually unplayable. The Splinter Cell franchise as a whole is honestly one of the greatest examples for why games preservation matters, as the last entry to the series released over a decade and 2 console generations ago. The only attention Ubisoft has even shown the franchise as of late is in the now canceled first-person shooter X Defiant, as a playable faction in the game was based on Splinter Cell's Echelon. Anyway, before wrapping up this video, there's one part of the article that I wanted to cover, and it comes from the comment section down below. A short back and forth between 2 commenters that I thought sums up both sides of the argument pretty well. Joe G states, "This deeply flawed decision will only encourage people to acquire and play these games illicitly. Demand does not disappear, and questionable legal decisions will only encourage normally compliant individuals to ignore the law. Companies will lose these revenues to the gray market." To which MNHG responds, "This ruling was for libraries to have access. The companies wouldn't have made anything if this passed. The demand remaining is important for the publishers. It keeps some people interested in the newer entries for those retro IPs. This ruling also allows publishers to use the law against anyone who pirates the games. If the above had passed and everyone started checking out games at the library to play at home, the publisher would have no legal recourse to prevent those lost sales from people playing free retro games at the library. If this passed, we can also argue that this new retro gaming group would be larger than the
Hey,
current
my library, you can check out video games. Can you check out video games at your library? Let me know in the comments.
piracy group. You would have people who pirate, people who used to pirate, and now use the library,
I know
and
it's talking about a digital library, but I'm saying my local library, you can check out video games.
people who never pirated and would now use the library. Not only did you lose any legal ground to defend your IP, you just enlarged the number of people not buying your current stuff. The only offset is the potential for people playing the library games is to get hooked enough on a continuing IP to buy the newer titles in that IP. This segment seems awfully small for the risk. The courts got it right. The correct solution is for publishers to choose to sell these games, but it's not something we should be able to force. A simple and cogent sentiment voiced by Joji, as he seems to speak on behalf of many people in the gaming community, followed by a complex and long winded reply from MNHG, who seems to be running interference for these massive companies. But to be fair to MNH, it's not like he's entirely wrong. I don't think the government should step in and force publishers to sell retro titles at any price. But there are several blind spots in his response that I want to touch on before wrapping up this
I
video.
feel like after a certain amount, excuse me, I feel like after a certain amount of years, it should be public domain. Um, I don't know what that length of time should be, but it has to be, when that console, maybe like two generations of consoles, you know, um, it's now in the public domain. Maybe that's not the best solution. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know what it is, but what we have now is trash. It, so many people just buy these games legally if they're readily accessible. I don't know what a good solution is. Y'all let me know in the comments.
Video. First and foremost, the quote from the legal response showed that the decision was meant to protect the collector's market and not the developer's IP. This is significant because developers don't actually receive any money when retro game stores sell their old products. When I purchased my physical copy of Splinter Cell Conviction, Ubisoft didn't see
Right. That's kind of what led me to begin emulating games because I was kind of torn and didn't want to necessarily download games illegally, but I don't know why I put illegally in quotes. But there's no other way to purchase some of these games. If I just buy it from someone on eBay, the developers, the publishers, the artists who made it don't get any of the money. They don't see anything. Joe Schmo from Kokomo is the one who gets the dollar.
dime from that sale. When it comes to the point about protecting these companies' IPs from piracy, I really don't believe that's the case, because who exactly are they going to sue? Certainly not individual pirates. The best you could say is that this creates a precedent for these companies to go after people who produce emulators. And I can almost guarantee that the second one of these companies sues somebody for producing hardware like a
I feel like, excuse me, I feel like it should be like Napster, right? Like when Napster first hit the scene and, people were just getting a bunch of music illegally. Some of you all might not remember Napster, but some of you may. Napster was a website where you could download any song for free. Okay, you might hear some Soldier Boy tell them over and over. You might get some viruses also, but you can get whatever song you want. And then Apple came out with iTunes, and that pretty much killed the market, right? Or it killed the downloading piracy market to a certain extent. I feel like they need to have something like that for video games, right? Like some type of library where you can just go and you can just buy whatever game you need. Don't need games. Whatever game you want for a certain price, man. Um, make it easy for people to get these games and you'll still get some money, man.
pseudo Game Boy or something, all of these emulators will immediately go digital. People will simply shift gears and start emulating software directly on their PC. I really don't see how it's supposed to protect them from piracy, because honestly, it won't be worth their time for them to go after individual people for emulating their software. And finally, this argument that the new group of retro gamers will be larger than the current group of pirates is honestly speculative at best and outright alarmist at worst. Just like there's no guarantee that preserving these games will create interest in subsequent products, there's no argument to state that just because these games are preserved, that will actually increase interest in the preserved copies themselves. A big part of the reason why games preservation is suffering right now is because a lot of modern gamers simply don't care about retro gaming at all. There are two simple words that sort of undo this entire IP argument anyway, and that's public domain. Why is it that books, images, music, and movies will all eventually slip into the public domain,
That's literally exactly what I said.
but games are somehow exempt from this? It's not like I'm making the argument that I should be legally allowed to rip the source code for the newest Call of Duty and distribute free versions of it, but why can't I do that for Pong, Dig Dug, Centipede, or even classics like Mario Kart? Once a game hits a shelf life of 30, 40, or even 50 years, why shouldn't we open it up to free distribution? To tell you the truth, it may be a little conspiratorial, but I'm honestly starting to feel like people who leave comments like MNHs are actually
And them the ops, man. Them the ops. Them them is not real gamers. You feel me? They ain't no real gamer. That's the CEO of Sony. Like on Reddit.
just sweeping for corporate interests. And I honestly don't buy for 1 second that making efforts to preserve these older titles is damaging their profit margins so much that it justifies their actions here. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much.
Alright, that was good. That was good. I really think that the solution is for hold on. Let me make this better. I really honestly think that the solution is for these developers and these companies to just make better games. If you made better games that were better than the old games, then you wouldn't worry about people downloading old games, right? So that's just my theory, you know. All right, let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. What else we got? All right. So check out this.
Angel Knot.
All right.
Wow.
So this is Google's latest update destroyed this gamer's $1 million business. This is about Retro Dodo. Okay. I love their YouTube channel. I also have both of their coffee table books, history of console gaming and history of handheld gaming. One I did an unboxing video for, but I haven't released it yet.
This is Brandon, the founder of the gaming publication Retro Dodo.
My bad. Hold up. All right, let's run it back.
His site was generating tens of thousands of dollars and millions of organic monthly visits.
Our best month was a couple million search visitors a month organically. Wow. It was an incredible moment. The little kid in me was basically collecting toys and gaming products for a living. And we actually had a $1 million offer to purchase Retro Dodo.
That's the book. That's the book that I got right here. We'll run it back.
Wow. It was an incredible moment. The little kid in me was basically collecting toys and gaming products for a living. And we actually had
that book. This is dope. Beautiful, beautiful book.
$1 million offer to purchase Retro Dodo.
You're living your childhood dream.
But out of nowhere, Google took everything away from him, and his dream became a nightmare. Like many other businesses, Retro Dodo has taken a massive hit after changes to Google's search algorithm.
People were literally searching for us and couldn't find us anywhere. We're still down about 85% traffic.
Do you feel like you were gaslit by Google?
But to understand the full story, we need to go back to where it all began. From an early age, gaming was a core part of Brandon's identity.
Lovely, look at that. So this is what started it all, really. The crisp.
What kind of accent is that? I can't. Did it say where he was from in the beginning and I missed it? I don't know what accent that is. Y'all let me know.
Christmas, I opened up my Game Boy Color and received Pokemon Blue. That was the moment that
Pokemon Blue gang.
kind of took my life to another level.
Which Pokemon game was your first Pokemon game? I only want to hear from people who had red and blue. I don't want to hear about black, white, crystal, silver, anything. I want to hear red or blue. If you weren't alive, if you weren't into Pokemon at that time, I'm not talking to you.
Because I would collect Pokemon, I would go out on the streets, trade with friends using the really crusty link cable, and you couldn't see on the Game Boy Color, so you had to be in the light. I was obsessed with that kind of stuff. You know, my parents didn't have too much money when we were growing up, so the products and the toys and the games that we did get were very precious to me. So I wanted to keep them clean, keep them sealed, keep them in their box, which my mother ended up throwing away. My whole
And I wish I had all of that footage of me as a kid.
Pokemon collection, Mama, I don't forget. Just took out half my health.
I know.
Although video games were Brandon's first love, Retro Dodo wasn't his first successful website.
I used to create sites in my spare time, which led me on to building my first website, which was actually about camper vans. It was predominantly started as a
I would
YouTube
not have
channel.
guessed that.
I was obsessed with them. I used to travel around countries with my friends in camper vans, and I managed to sell that brand in 2019 for about $100,000, which was obscene for me. Once I sold the camper van site, it kind of gave me, I think I calculated it's like a 2-year runway to build something cool, and that's when I built Retro Dodo, which is my bigger passion.
Brandon and his editor-in-chief, Seb, began building Retro Dodo and quickly found an audience in a niche, reviewing retro gaming products.
Retro Dodo YouTube channel is so dope. If you have not checked it out, you definitely need to check it out. They are super dope.
But they needed to expand their audience. They turned to keyword research to discover what their audience was searching for on the internet.
How to defeat the last boss in Sonic, you know, so a new Pokemon game came out, for example. What are the top Pokemon that people want to catch? We would buy the games in, test them on our consoles, put hours upon hours into these games to almost completion. And while doing that, we'd figure out the pain points in the game and write guides on it. I think our best month was a couple million search visitors a month organically.
Wow.
Our best month, we had, I'd say, about $50,000 in revenue. 60%
wow.
of our revenue was through display advertising, maybe another 15% on affiliate, 10% YouTube, and then 5% sponsorships and collaborations.
How did it feel when you were at the peak of your success?
It was unreal seeing the money come in and having a bunch of fun working with
Man, he's probably using all of that money to buy more video games.
friends, getting to work with some of the biggest gaming brands in the world that I idolized as a child. We actually had a $1 million offer
Don't
to
idolize.
purchase Retro Dodo. One of the primary reasons I didn't want to sell, and it goes back to my first project I sold, is the buyer actually destroyed that site, over-optimized, filled it with ads, used AI garbage on it, and now it's just completely eradicated off of Google. And I was worried that the purchaser that wanted this brand would do the same. The brand that I've been building for 5 or 6 years, it just didn't feel right handing it over to someone. So it was a tricky one. I think we had a couple of weeks to decide whether or not to take it. And then the update happened.
He should have took that money.
At the peak, you said you were at around 1 million clicks from organic.
Yeah, about 2 million in total though, with social traffic and Discover. And
Where are you at today?
we are at around about 200,000 visitors a month now. I was petrified, to be honest with you. Like, we were being inundated with replies, subscribers, followers, people saying how much they loved their site. So why was Google not seeing this and actually penalizing us? I look back at the last 6 years and kind of blamed myself for it. And it was panic. I was looking everywhere for help. I was looking online. I was talking with friends and everyone in the gaming industry that were friends that were doing something similar to me. We're all in the same boat. It was like just a pure apocalypse on every level. I was again naive, probably because of my experience with SEO. I thought it would come back in a few weeks. A few weeks turned into a few months. I kept my team and we were burning through cash quite quickly, but I was hoping because we were doing everything right.
Man, that's tough. That's tough because you hear all the time, don't just build your platform on a platform like YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, as we know what just happened with TikTok. You know, we lost it, then we got it right back. But his is really tough because his was on his website. Like he owned his website, you know? And Google is the biggest search engine and they're like suppressing how many people are able to see it.
We weren't doing anything
So like what do you do in that type of scenario?
shady. We were following Google's guidelines to the T, but it just never ever came back. And unfortunately, as the months went by, we had to get rid of my good friends that were a part of the team month by month.
So do you think that Google's guidelines are just a bunch of lies?
I think Google's guidelines are correct and it's how websites should be built, but Google doesn't follow them themselves and they don't reward the websites that follow them.
In a personal video, Brandon shared his frustrations about how Google algorithm changes have buried independent sites like his, favoring larger media companies, Reddit, in its AI-generated answers
that's what I was
while
about to
profiting
say.
from content created by smaller websites.
Yeah, so basically what Google has been doing, and many of you may know, if you Google something, instead of the website coming up with a top answer, it's going to have their AI and the algorithm spit out an answer. And the answer that they're spitting out is generally from Reddit. It might not even be a correct answer. It's just spitting out something. And because they're doing that, websites like his, like Retro Dodo, his isn't popping up, you know, how do I catch this Pokemon or whatever? Like it's coming up with the AI generated answer, which could be completely wrong.
Soon after, he received an unexpected email.
Google decided to invite me in to talk about the state of search. I just pretty much called them out. And
What do you do if you get a email from Google? Like, that's pretty big.
Danny Sullivan from Google wanted to invite me in to talk about that privately in London. So it was pretty much a one-on-one with Danny. He showed me around Google and then we sat down and spoke about my concerns. It was a very open conversation with Danny and I believe he's doing the right thing in trying to learn how he can make the SERPs a better place and support independent publishers. But as we've seen, you know, nothing's came from that and traffic has gotten a lot worse since that meeting with Danny.
So do you feel like you
So what was the point? What, they bring them there just to show them their cool office?
were gaslit by Google?
A little bit, yeah. It's almost like they're saying, hey, it's going to get better. Follow this donut on a stick. It's going to get better. But
Donut
actually,
on a
it
stick.
hasn't got better. And I think they just need to be open and honest with what they say to independent publishers and also in their guidelines.
Brandon left his meeting with Google without answers, but he did gain fresh perspective.
January the 2nd, when my son was born, that kind of changed everything for me. I was
He teaching his son right.
putting my eggs in one basket. That was the Google basket. I knew I had to change and build a media brand that was slightly different, that had multiple revenue sources and didn't rely heavily on one. So this is what it will initially look like. One of the products I want to build is a display called the Dodo display, where a modular pegboard system that can show your cartridges and handhelds in a premium form factor. We've also got 2 books on the market now called
Yeah, I got both.
handhelds in a premium form factor. We've also got
That looks so dope. Oh my gosh. I've been trying to figure out how to display my handhelds. I can't wait till they come out with that. Oh, that looks so clean.
2 books on the market now called A Handheld History, which has sold over 15,000 units. That's 15,000 gamers that
Yeah.
we've, you know, produced a book
I got
for.
both of them.
I do
Look,
want
I
to build
pre-ordered
an
the
event every year in the
Sorry,
UK
second.
that brings the retro gaming industry together. And then your smaller scale stuff like merchandise, t-shirts. We're building out a sticker kit for kids as well. So I think it's opened my eyes to the exact people we want to pull through on our website. We want to pull.
But I guess my question still remains, okay, that's dope that they're coming out with more products, but it's going to be for their website. So the website is still going to probably be getting traffic through Google, right? So how does that necessarily solve the problem?
People through that we can convert into community members that will read our content for 5, 10, 15 years.
So I took a look through your site and I saw some really great things that you're doing and potential opportunities you might be missing out on. Is it all right if I
This is Pepper. This is Pepper. Say hi, Pepper. Say hi.
show you?
Sure, please. Yeah, I'd appreciate that.
I looked at your site in Ahrefs and I think that you've done an incredible job. Link building, I don't think you've ever actually built links, right?
No.
but I noticed one thing that you're doing that is organically building some amazing links. So if we look at the backlink profile, did you build this link on Wikipedia or did that come from somewhere else?
Somewhere else.
Okay, so somebody has linked to you to your best-selling GBA games from Wikipedia. You've gotten links from the New York Times Wirecutter.
Okay, so I think this is answering my question.
Here's another one from The Verge, Engadget, NBC, and you've gotten all these links. So a lot of these links that you're getting are based on the fact that you're actually testing new products very quickly. And so what ends up happening is if we look at your best links in top pages, if we look at from the top here to the bottom here, we're gonna see where you lost your traffic. And I don't know if this was intentional or not.
Yeah, some of this is intentional.
Yes. So, for example, like you have a lot of these where it's just games. You have these games that are coming out. I don't know how big this game is, but if we look here, you got 3 referring domains there. Kingdom Hearts, another 3, Luigi's Mansion, 7. But if we actually click on it, it redirects back to your homepage.
Okay, I'd like to pick your brains here. So we were producing content on games that were not
Okay, so I thought it was solving a problem, but maybe it's not solving a problem. I don't know. I'm gonna be honest with you. They speaking a little over my head right now. Okay.
not out yet. Rumors, speculation, kind of our expert opinions on it. And I was under the impression that that's not what Google wants. Almost it felt a little bit clickbaity, although maybe someone wanted our professional opinions on it.
But this kind of comes back to the whole idea of who are you creating content for? Are you creating content for the user or for search? And in my opinion, users want to read about these rumors. And so personally, I wouldn't have deleted it because what's happening is you're doing these great reviews that nobody else is doing because like you have the expertise where you can.
Let me see some. Who put this video out? Okay, I'm not familiar with this channel. I wonder, do they specialize in like, SEO or something like that? Because he putting him up on game. I wasn't expecting that. I thought he was just like interviewing him.
Make these predictions, but then you just redirected them to the homepage. And so these links that you're getting to these pages are just being wasted now. You're redirecting it back to the homepage when there's no relevance from Luigi's Mansion to retrododo.com. Another site, macrumors.com, so they do like rumors on Mac products. So these spikes here all coincide. They're all in September. Do you notice that?
Oh, are these the iPhone releases, are they?
These are the iPhone releases. So Mac Rumors is really well known for these rumors, but instead of 301 redirecting it, they create a page like macrumors.com/iPhone17, and then that page will be all about rumors. It's because it hasn't been released. People want to know about what are the rumors, what are the new features that are going to come out. And then once it actually gets released, they update the content to be an iPhone 17 review. So now they buy the product.
Oh.
And so rather than redirecting it to a homepage, losing all the link equity, killing the pages that people are coming to you for, instead you could just turn those into reviews of the products that have actually come out.
All right.
If you look at some of their top keywords,
Okay, I'm gonna skip past
should
them.
all position the iPhone.
He just putting them up on game. I'm up on game.
That's
Update.
All
brands,
right.
Fight for the underdog and build businesses with more.
Yeah, let's fight for the
Yeah, so this
underdog.
is-
All right, Retro Dodo. That is that. All right, my bad, y'all. Started checking out towards the end, y'all. I got 88.
It's a really unique one.
Oh, y'all gotta bear with me. You feel me? All right, but that's the gist of it. Retro Dodo's dope. Make sure that you go and buy both of their books. They are amazing. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump to the next subject. All right. Okay. All right, boom. All right, so this is, I believe, about physical versus digital. I think. I can't remember. I haven't seen it yet, though. But all right, let's go ahead and check this out, This is Topher A.
Or digital. You know, there's actually a really good argument to be had, physical or digital. You know, there's actually a really good argument to be had on both sides here. And because of some recent events that have happened with my family, I've found myself thinking about this discussion
What y'all say? Physical, digital? Let me know in the comments. I want to say a little bit of both.
quite a bit. Now, whether you grew up in the 80s, 90s, or early 2000s, where your only option was cartridge,
Hey, his tattoos is hard. That dude got a Game Boy tattooed? Oh, heck yeah.
disc, or don't play, or you grew up with more modern consoles and you just load
That's how you know you about that life, when you got a Game Boy tattooed. I'm not about that life, I guess.
your hard drive to the max with every game you want to play. This is definitely a discussion you're going to want to participate in, because today I'm going to take a look at both of them, and I'm going to play devil's advocate, because I think you'll actually be pretty shocked at some of the arguments I've had with myself over digital media and digital media rights.
That's how games and like hobbies will get you. They'll get you arguing with yourself.
Even though I grew up with and still collect physical media. So today, we're gonna have that hard conversation. And we're gonna find out just what side of the line do you lie on? Or maybe you're like me and you like to blur the lines. So I am a child of the 80s, through and through. That means when I was growing up, there was no choice. When you wanted to play a game, you had to buy the cartridge, whether it was NES, Super NES, Sega Genesis, N64, or one of the handhelds. You had to go to the store and you had to buy a game. And over years of playing and collecting, I have amassed a lot of physical media. Now, whether we're talking...
Let me ask y'all a question, right? And this is not judging this dude, but when do we get to the point with collecting where it's not collecting, but it's just hoarding, right? Is that a thing, you know? Or is it just always collecting because it's games? Is there a such thing as digital hoarding, right? I don't know. Let me know.
cartridges or game discs themselves. There is something very tangible, very physical, and very permanent about having physical media. You know, when you buy a piece of physical media, whether it be a cartridge or a disc, you own it. You can touch it. And being able to hold this kind of stuff is what gives you that sense of ownership. Back then, when a company decided to ship a game, it had to be complete, because this was permanent. There was no day one updates. There was no patches. There was no DLC. Now, a lot of you may not know this, but there were versions of games. In some cases, the first version of the game can be very different than a second, third, or fourth version, but most of the time you didn't even know you were buying a different version because they really didn't want to be public about it. This was permanent, which also means sometimes the game just sucked. And this here is the argument that you see made most today. A lot of people will say games ship in a broken state. Back in the day, games couldn't ship in a broken state, but when I was growing up, a lot of games shipped in a broken state. We just called them bad games. Nowadays, you know, you can do a day one patch or even over time. That's something
I keep trying to get my cat off my lap because it keeps trying to get the wires on my in-ears, and I don't want to keep fighting with this cat, so I keep like trying to get her off of me, and she keeps jumping back.
we'll talk
But that's the struggle I got going on over here.
about when we get to the digital media part. And a lot of that stuff sounds really nice, right? And that's why a lot of us loved our physical media growing up. But let's talk about the downsides to physical media. First and foremost, as you can see when we walk around my game rooms, yes, plural,
Dang,
takes
plural.
up a lot of space. All of this stuff here is not small by any means. So if you really want a store kiosk Virtual Boy, you have to have the space for it, which is why back in the day it was so enticing for us to trade all of our games in. Boy, is that something that you're regretting now, isn't it? And especially growing up when you're a kid, not
Any of you all have any rare games that you traded in to get a game that you thought was a better game, and then you're like, "Dag, I should have kept that because now it's worth $400 on eBay"? Anybody?
everybody has the space for stuff like this. I certainly didn't, and I will tell
Oh,
you,
that's hard. That dude
it
got
was
a
a caveat
Garbage Pail Kids neon sign. Yo, that's sick.
when my wife and I decided to buy a house. There had to be a room that would house all of this stuff, which she was super thrilled about. Now, the other con to
Bet.
physical media is actually multifaceted, and that is it's physical. So for a company to produce this stuff, there is a cost. Outside of development cost, there's the cost of the goods, there's the cost of the plastic, and there is also a environmental cost to this, because while I collected all of this sort of stuff, not everybody did. And so for a lot of folks, when they moved away from their parents' house, off to college, off to the military, wherever they were going, a lot of this stuff got thrown away, and the plastics end up God knows where. But I would definitely say the biggest benefit to physical media is ownership. When you buy a physical copy of a game, you know that, unless your console breaks or something unfortunately happens to the cartridge or the disc,
You have the game.
you will be able to play that game forever in perpetuity. Your kids will be able to play it if you're a person like me and you save all of your crap. And if there's anything that we have learned as a society, it is that people love to own their stuff. I know I do. Now, let's talk about an interesting trend that started right around the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 era. Game devs started giving us the option or the ability to download the games directly to our consoles, our hard drives in our consoles. And this sort of started with little bite-sized games.
This dude's
You remember
setup is
Xbox
amazing.
Live Arcade and stuff like that. It really wasn't until the end of that era when we really started to see storefronts on the Xbox and the PlayStation where we could actually buy the games physically on the day of release and download them. Now, I don't care how you say you feel about it today. At the time, everyone thought that was incredibly cool and convenient. Because before that, if I wanted to buy a copy of WCW NWO Revenge, I would have to go to the store.
But something that we didn't think about is, okay, how am I going to take this game over to my friend's house, right? Because when you got a 64 or a PlayStation, you're just taking the disc or taking the cartridge.
And better yet, I would have to go to the store if I wanted it on time and wait in line. And in some cases, you go to the store at midnight because you were hardcore like me and you wanted to play it the second it was released. Well, when this started happening, boy, wasn't it cool. We didn't even need to go to the store, and if you lived on this side of the country, you didn't even have to wait till midnight most of the time. You had to wait until like 9 o'clock, and then the storefront would update, and you could download God of War or Halo 4 or whatever game it was.
It's just something that's not magical about downloading something versus walking into a physical store. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I know the convenience, but if you grew up with like a Funko Land, oh man, those were the days. Like, I mean, you still got GameStops, but GameStop ain't a vibe like Funko Land. That's for real, for real.
You were overly anticipating playing, and you can start playing it, well, I don't want to say right away, but you had some download time, and then you can start playing it. That was when the avalanche happened, and pretty much everything went day and date digital, because before then, it was a handful of games. Most of the time, it was just first-party games, so the Xbox developed games and the PlayStation developed games you could download. But a lot of the other stuff, you still had to go to the store and buy it physically. By the time the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 rolled around, those stores were packed. Everything that you would want was available on those stores. And I'll admit, even I, at that point, was like, but why go to the store? And then they started the pre-download thing, where I could buy it ahead of time, pre-download it, and then at 9 p.m. on Monday night, because Tuesdays was always release day, I could start playing it. That was awesome. And I really, thinking back to it now, I really only did that as a necessity of being a hardcore gamer. I wanted to get in the game and get in the action as fast as possible. And that was the quickest way for me to do it. Going to the store, waiting in line at midnight was not going to cut it anymore. And so I sacrificed being able to tangibly own these things for the ease and convenience of being able to download it right then.
This is the generation of convenience. We've never had things more convenient, whether it be food, whether it be, like he said, games, movies, everything is at our fingertips now. We are so spoiled. We are such a spoiled, lazy generation. You know, everything is convenience. You know, if I can't get my Amazon package within a day, 2 days, 3 days max, it's like, what are we doing?
And that was really cool for about 2 years.
So
now
spoiled.
let's time travel a little bit to the announcement of this current generation. You know, the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. Lots of rumors swirled around at the time that especially Microsoft was going to do a diskless system. Whoa, what the f? You're gonna give us a console that can't play my physical games? Even though, let's be honest, most of us were buying our games digital. That felt like it was a step too far. And at the time, Microsoft sort of backpedaled and they were like, okay. You're not ready for the all-digital future, but
That's what they always do. They always backpedal a little, but just know it's coming. Whatever they backpedaling from, they done showed their hand. It's coming, you know? PlayStation done that a couple times.
Get there soon. And let's look at the positives of digital media. I just listed a bunch of them. You don't have to go to the store.
It ain't a backpedal, it's a postpone.
So you're not driving a vehicle. You're not spending the gas to get there. You're not standing in line, and you're not buying a piece of plastic that eventually, unless you're like me and you keep everything, is gonna have to go somewhere. It's gonna have to go in a landfill, and it's accrued cost by the developer. So when a developer produces Grand Theft Auto 4 and they want to press, 5 million copies of it, that costs a little bit of money. But if they just need to put it on a server and let everybody download it, that actually costs them far less money, which you would think would mean the game would cost less money. That's a conversation for a whole nother video. The other positive that I said I would touch on later is the fact that if the game shipped in not such a desirable condition, like maybe there were some bugs.
Games be shipping like Kanye West albums. I'm just going to go back and update it later.
Or things needed to be fixed and you're downloading the game, then it was much easier to release day one patches. If you're downloading the game, they can just load the day one patch into the download and you would never know the difference. But that seemed to sort of create a ship the game anyway sort of culture, or at least that's what a lot of people think, because a lot of games were being shipped in pretty bad states. I mean, we all remember stuff like No Man's Sky, even Cyberpunk had its problems. I mean, the list goes on and on. Fallout 76. This sort of thing helped create and fuel that culture. So you'd get in a position where...
And when No Man's Sky came out in that condition, see, I didn't really know about No Man's Sky until after the disaster of that game, until after they had fixed everything. But looking at old YouTube videos of just like the backlash of how broken that game was, you would think that every game development company would be on their A game and just, it would be a nightmare for a game to come out in that state. But nope, instead, it is now the future and the present of how all games are released.
Maybe there's only 5% of the developers who are actually thinking that way and utilizing that. But because there's 5%, there becomes an antitrust amongst consumers, and then consumers start to just assume that, everybody is doing it, which in my opinion is not something that happens. So when we started to move from these older generations into these newer generations, it was pretty widely accepted. We really didn't have to keep all of this storage space for all of our beloved video games anymore. We could pile them all onto a hard drive. That is, until we realized one thing. Let's take a little trip over here to the NES games. Let's grab the first one on the shelf. This is Quattro Sports.
Quattro.
This is a really good example. If I want to play Quattro Sports, I can come in here, I can grab it
comment
off of
if
my
you ever
shelf,
played Quattro
and I can
Sports.
pop it in my NES behind me, and I can play it. But let's say I want to play the hit Xbox Live game based off of the movie Real Steel. I don't know if anybody remembers that. It wasn't actually a hit, but
they should have named, I always felt like this, they should have named Real Steel Rock'em Sock'em Robots. That movie would have sold so many more tickets. Why didn't they name it Rock'em Sock'em Robots instead of Real Steel?
using it as an example, let's say I want to play that. I actually can't grab that off my shelf. Technically, that game was never released physically. It was only released on Xbox Live. People started asking the question, if it's installed on here, and that's the only way we can get it, do we technically own the game, or are we buying some kind of license?
We're buying a license
to play the game.
to play the game.
Now this is something that started.
Was it California, or is it just everywhere? I don't remember, but they've actually passed a law last year, I think it was, where now online storefronts have to say that they are selling you a license of the game. It can no longer just say purchase game or whatever. I don't know if that's only in California though. Let me know.
Happening on PC long before it started happening on consoles, because still to this day you can walk into a GameStop and buy a physical copy of most of the games that you would want to play. I'll bet you do have to install it on the machine, and it has to run through some sort of online check in order for you to even play it most of the time. That's beside the point. On PC, they stopped selling. Do you remember big box PC games? They stopped selling those things years ago. Most PCs don't even come with a disk drive anymore. That's sort of something of the past.
That's
Nonetheless,
crazy.
this is something that people started thinking about. And this was a question.
Could you imagine when computers stopped coming with floppy disk drives? People are probably going nuts. This doesn't have a floppy disk? What the heck?
That a lot of people started asking, what happens when you buy a game digitally, you download it, and then support for that game stops? Or let's say your hard drive goes out, or worse, your console goes out. So what does that mean for your $50, $60, or even $70 that you spent on the game? Now this is the argument that I see made online most frequently. When you buy a game these days and you're buying it digital, you don't own the game. You own a copy of the license. And if that game were to disappear, or, the storefront goes down, you don't own that game anymore. But every single Nintendo game I've ever bought, every single Super Nintendo game, Sega Genesis, Game Boy, Game Gear, GameCube, Nintendo 64.
Why do they have a problem with just selling us the game? Like the rights to the game. Like, why is that an issue? I don't understand. Like, I understand if the storefront goes down or whatnot, but I can't even wrap my mind around what greedy incentive it is to sell us the license. Like, why not just sell us the digital game, like the rights to the game. I can't even understand it. That does anybody know? Like, what am I missing?
Game that I've ever bought, I still own. I know that sounds a little fanatical, even when I say it out loud, but I own all those games. So what's the difference between then and now? That's where this line gets really, really blurry. And that's where this conversation has started to fracture in many different directions, which, again, conversation for another video. If you want to watch that video, you should check it out here. This is why I think game preservation is so important. And this is why I also think that retro gaming in general is important. It is also why I'm such a proponent for stuff like the Chromatic by Mod Retro.
Okay, so he was holding that chromatic earlier, and I couldn't remember what it was called. So I'm glad he brought it up. So the chromatic, for those of you all who don't know, is made by the creator of the Oculus, and it looks pretty dope. Retro Game Core recently just did a review of it. I'm not gonna lie, it looked dope. It does not look $200 dope. I'm sorry. Like, I am sorry.
Which is a brand new Game Boy Color that takes your original Game Boy cartridges, and they are currently re-releasing Game Boy cartridges with not only relicensed.
Now, they did have me with that. If you go on the website, you can buy games. That's pretty cool.
But brand new games. And I think stuff like that is really important. Now, let's touch on something that I mentioned in the beginning of this video. With some current events that are happening in my family, this is a conversation that I've been having with myself and my wife quite a bit. On Christmas Eve, I bought Leland a PlayStation 5, and I bought Crosby an Xbox Series X. Their own consoles. Aside from the Nintendo Switch that they have, it's their first consoles. Their first, real, full, big consoles. And as you may know, if you follow my videos, I play a lot of Fortnite. Or I guess I should say I played a lot of Fortnite. We played a lot of family Fortnite. Been playing pretty consistently. I've been playing pretty consistently since it launched. And the boys have been playing very consistently for the last year. They've put a lot of time and we've put a lot of money into it. Now, some of you may ask, well, Fortnite is a free game, but they sell cosmetics, battle passes. So you can put real money into this and you can buy digital items in the game. And again, this is a very divisive thing. Some people really don't like it, and some people really, really like it. I fall on the side of I enjoy it quite a bit. I have bought quite a few skins in my Fortnite account.
I mean, if they're putting out a game for free and they're selling skins, like, there should be a way for people to be able to, for the developers to be able to monetize their game in some way, shape, or form. I mean, obviously, Fortnite has a bazillion different ways that they monetize, but just speaking in general, I mean, I don't have a problem with that. Just like Poke MMO, that game is free, right? And I definitely buy cosmetics from time to time.
Across multiple different games. I'm now buying skins in Marvel Rivals. And so my kids periodically would purchase skins also, or I guess I should say Mom and I would purchase skins for them. Well, on Christmas Eve, when I was transferring their Fortnite account from the Switch to an Epic account, and then tying their new consoles to that Epic account so all of the progression can be shared across platforms, we had a little back-end snafu with Leland's account, leaving it completely blocked and in limbo. We can no longer access that account. Now, if you follow some of my videos, you've seen me do updates on the conversations I've had with Epic, who, unfortunately, still, at the time of this recording, they have not been helpful at all. As of right now, they're telling me, basically, the account is unrecoverable. And this is something that, for the last 2 weeks, I've had to chew on a little bit. It probably bothers me more because it's my child. If it were my own account, I take some accountability for the fact that, like, well, I bought into digital stuff and digital's not forever. I do take accountability for that stuff, but it's a little bit different. It's my child. As a parent,
I feel you.
Get a little bit protective of that sort of stuff. You don't want to see your kids hurt, and you don't want to see anything taken from them. Not that anything nefarious has happened. Nobody stole his account, but it got
Yes,
linked.
they did steal his account. The developers, they stole his account.
To a empty shell account, and nobody has access to it. They tell me it's nameless, but they also say that because I didn't start it or because I don't have email access to it, they cannot give me access to it. That's sort of where we stand. Now, the thing that I've had to kind of chew on and think about quite a bit over the last couple weeks as I've posted these update videos, people have referenced in the comments, well, this is what you get for buying into digital crap. Nothing is forever, right? Well, technically, not nothing.
If you spend some money on something, you should be able to access that whenever you want to. Flat out. I don't care if it's digital. I don't care if it's physical. I don't care if it's digital and we walking around in the metaverse. If I get some metaverse tennis shoes and I'm walking around, I better be able to access them whenever I want.
Because there are a lot of things that, while they aren't forever, last a pretty long time. And that's where this argument between physical and digital media comes up. But while I was having the conversation with my wife, I actually was playing devil's advocate a little bit, and I feel like I made a pretty valid point. Let's look at it like an experience. Let's not look at this like ownership of something, but more like an experience. Let's say like a theme park, right? If you go to Disneyland or Magic Mountain, you go to a theme park and you pay X amount of dollars to enter that theme park and do whatever it is you want for the day. A place like Disneyland can be fairly expensive, 100, 200 bucks maybe a day. And then you get in there and you buy fast passes or whatever they're called, lightning lane, which allows you to sort of skip the lane. And there's an extra 30, 40 bucks, whatever that cost is. At the end of the day, when you leave that park, you've had that experience. It's like going to a baseball game also, or a sporting event. You pay money, you go there, you have that experience, and then you leave, and the thing that you now have ownership over is that experience. When you leave a theme park, it's not like they give you
Listen. I'm gonna let him finish his thought.
a big plaque or a token or something of gratitude that you can physically take with you. Maybe in today's world, we're not supposed to have tangible goods for everything. Maybe the experience is what we're paying for. When you go to a theme park, you spend...
No. Okay, so I see he's trying to, have a glass half full perspective on this whole thing. my kid, and she's going crazy. Okay, I see he's trying to have a glass half full perspective, but no. If you buy something and they say that they're going to sell it to you, then they need to sell it to you, or they make it seem like they're selling it to you. A better example is if you go to Walmart and you buy a vacuum, and then, you've had the experience of vacuum in your house, and then you get a knock on your door, and it's the Walmart supervisor, and he's coming to get the vacuum back. He said, "Did you have a great experience?"
And all day there, you get the experience, and you leave, but you paid money to go.
That's not he's trying to have he's trying to be optimistic about this, but no, I'm sorry.
That the way we should be looking at media in general.
It makes me think.
And if we do look at media that way, what do we think of physical media then? I feel like that is a really interesting argument to be had. I really appreciate all the physical media that I have. I operate.
It makes me think about, I was trying to look up the quote. It makes me think about the quote. It says, "You will have nothing and you will love it." That's kind of the perspective that he's giving me over here. Hold up, my bad. I turned off here we go.
Of this argument. I love my physical media, but I also love my ROG Ally, and I have quite a few games installed on here. I'm gonna be really bummed out if in 2 or 3 weeks we still don't have access to Leland's account. It's gonna be, it's gonna make me, I don't know how I will feel about it, to be honest with you. I'll probably be upset with Epic Games. I'm upset with Epic Games now.
I'm
In fact, I'm taking a
upset with
stand and
Epic
I am
Games.
not streaming or playing Fortnite until this is resolved. But if it's not resolved, what if I chose to look at this entire thing as a year-long experience? Leland played Fortnite for a year, a little over a year. I don't want to know how much money we put into that, including battle pass access. But
all right, we're gonna go ahead and wrap that segment up. I can't listen to it anymore, you know, because I know that he's trying to look at it from a glass half full perspective. And I know I have kids too, and he's trying to cope. You know, he's trying to cope with this situation, and I get it. He's not at fault. Salute to him for trying to look at it from that perspective. But I don't agree, and I can't listen to it no more because I'm getting mad at Epic Games on behalf of him and his kid. So we're going to go ahead and go to the next video. All right. Let me know if y'all mad about that whole situation, because I am. All right, so let's see. So this embarrassing game console launched 30 years ago. All right, let's see what they talking about.
It was a truly fantastic era in gaming. 2D games were really starting to show their stuff, while 3D gaming was taking shape 1 year at a time. When it comes to the console wars of that generation, we all know how things turned out. Newcomer Sony and their PlayStation blew everybody out of the water to become the first game console to sell over 100 million units. Nintendo and Sega were mostly vying for second place, in due part to the Nintendo 64 having a delayed release in addition to sticking to cartridges, while the Sega Saturn was virtually one debacle after another. However, its first couple years marked a very weird point in the gaming industry. Before those three consoles would duke it out over the 5th generation, you had the newcomer 3DO, which, while a total bust, still sold some decent numbers and was the strongest system on the market at the time, an old stalwart Atari with the Jaguar, which was a dumpster fire from the word go. But there was also another company that tried their hand at this era, one that was actually a holdover from the 4th generation. That
Panasonic? Who y'all think is going to be? Let me know. And comment. Let me know. Okay.
was the Nippon Electric Company, known by its abbreviation NEC. If that sounds familiar, it's highly likely because of the TurboGrafx. While it was a bit of a bust outside Japan, it was a major success in its home country, such as
y'all know Kanye West wanted to name one of his albums TurboGrafx.
There was a successor system developed for it, a console almost completely forgotten today. That was the PCFX, a very ill-fated system pretty much since it launched. I've been waiting for just the right time to make this video, as this is a system that definitely deserves attention. And as I upload this on the 30th anniversary of its launch in Japan, I can't think of any better time to talk about it. This is the tale of the forgotten successor to the TurboGrafx, the NEC PCFX.
Oh, wow.
Before I begin, I would like you to consider hitting that subscribe button if this video turned out to be worth your time. As a one-man operation, any support is appreciated, and I give my thanks in advance if you do so. To tell the tale of the PCFX, we need to go back to about 1990. The PC Engine is doing quite well in Japan, and as a result, NEC and Hudson have formed a pretty strong business relationship. At some point around this time, somebody says we should probably get ahead of the curve and try to make a successor system to the PC Engine. Both companies eventually agree, and over the course of 1990 and 91, they get to work on the prototype system, with Hudson providing the custom chipset and NEC doing the rest. Eventually, at the start of 1992, it all comes together to become what they call the Tetsujin, translation Iron Man. When trying to gather interest for the system, 3 games were displayed. 2 of them were simple tech demos, but the third one was what got heads really turning. The game in question appeared to be an updated version of Star Soldier in full 3D. Well, not quite. It was actually 3D objects plastered onto a pre-rendered background, kind of like still feed for the Sega CD. Even with the illusion, it was enough of a ruse to gather enough interest that NEC and Hudson were both confident that, yeah, this might actually work. The system was originally intended to release in late 1992. As that time approached, however, they decided to push it to around spring 1993, citing a lack of completed games. Okay, fair enough. However, that time frame came and went as well, and that's when rumors started to come around. Many
What game was that? It looked like it wanted to be Zelda with all of his heart.
speculated that NEC and Hudson were a bit hesitant on releasing a successor system while the PC Engine was still doing rather well in Japan. However, what many failed to realize was that NEC had quite a lot of fighting within itself at the time. Not to mention pulling a Sega with their Super Graphics, which was a total dumpster fire for a number of reasons, and wanted to pull out of the North American market due
Yo,
to
that super graphics look dope though.
a total dumpster.
That is a okay. It might not have been successful, but that is a cool looking console. When I think about it, it looks kind of like a car engine with a joystick attached to it.
Fire for a number of reasons, and wanted to pull out of the North American market due to the TurboGrafx 16's failure. So with nobody given the green light to release the Techigen, it just sat there as new competition made its presence known. The release of the FM Towns Marty would officially christen the 5th generation, but more importantly, the 3DO and Atari Jaguar were coming out as well. As 1994 rolled around, Hudson simply continued to make games for the PC Engine, while NEC, well, they still had their heads in the fucking sand regarding the Techigen. What was once a fascinating system in the middle of 1992 was aging and already being outperformed by systems on the market, particularly the 3DO. The release of the specs for the Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation would eventually be the slap that brought NEC back to reality. NEC and Hudson both realized that Techigen wasn't going to work in the current conditions, so they had to go back to the drawing board. The main problem with doing this at this point, however, was that because they sat on the Techigen for so long, there was no time to just start from scratch. Instead, they chose to modify the original Techigen architecture. The original custom chipset was streamlined to a single coprocessor and a 32-bit CPU, while the exterior was transformed into what would eventually be the final product. It's around this time that the working title FX came into play, and after
Yo, I want to say something, man. It is so impressive to me that people make videos like this and just know so many details about it. You know what I mean? I can never put together a video like this. That is just so impressive.
name checking with the PC Engine, it officially became the PCFX in early 1994. The PCFX would make its social debut at the Tokyo Toy Show in June 1994.
So make sure y'all subscribe to Eclipse 14 because he definitely put in work.
The system competed for consumer attention against not just the Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation, but also the Bandai Playdia, which was a game console marketed as mostly an educational multimedia machine, and the Neo Geo CD, which was SNK's attempt to make their outrageously expensive games a little bit more reasonable to the masses. Fortunately, the PCFX would get its share of attention, though a lot of it was ridiculed because of the system's design. It looks like a tower PC. Okay, to be fair to it,
that must look horrible.
PC outside the game console industry was mostly known for their computers. The PC 8800 series dominated much of the Japanese home computer industry over the course of the 80s, and the PC 9800 series was still in production at the time. In addition, the PCFX was intended to be an upgradable system, kind of like, well, a tower PC. It sounds like a good idea on paper, but that's really a caveat for another major issue the PCFX had that wouldn't get noticed until months later.
Y'all think that one came with a mouse and keyboard?
It did not have a polygon generator.
You what?
Oh dear. This is gonna suck. So, for the lack of a polygon generator, NEC doubled down on what was a hot trend at the time.
I don't know what that means. I don't know. A polygon generator. Okay. I mean, I think I know, but I don't know. If you know, let me know.
Full motion video. At the time, the most common video encoding format was the MPEG format. It would get the job done, but more often than not, the video had a grainy resolution and low frame rates. If one was lucky, it would cap at just 24 frames per second. NEC said fuck that format and instead used a more memory-intensive motion JPEG format. Two specific graphics chips would convert the JPEG images into video format, while the system itself ignored the CPU bus and instead sent image information directly to the video out through just a few necessary coprocessors. This resulted in not just higher quality animation, but the system was able to run it at a consistent 30 frames per second. When it came to video playback, the PCFX was second to no one. Beyond that, because the system didn't have a polygon generator, NEC stuck to the original Techigen format of using pre-rendered polygons. The games shown in
y'all ever seen Silver Surfer Baseball?
the PCFX's booth was a game called FX Fighter, a game deliberately made to steal the thunder from Sega's Virtua Fighter, which ironically was also on display at the convention. FX Fighter really fascinated people, and it contributed to expectations heading into the console's upcoming launch. Even though the PCFX would not be backwards compatible with the PC Engine or PC Engine CD, and even though NEC and Hudson both knew the system was quite underpowered, it had its audience. For the next 6 months, the console was marketed across Japan. However, all that early hype was as good as it was going to get for the PCFX, as consumers and developers alike would soon realize it got 99 problems and NEC is all of them. On the 16th of December 1994, NEC announced the final discontinuation of the PC Engine, allowing the PCFX's launch to go full steam ahead. The PCFX would finally be released to the public on the 23rd of December 1994 at a price of just under 50,000 yen. If the console released outside Japan, which would have occurred no later than the middle of 95, rough price tag estimates for the period would have put it at about $600 had it come out to North America, and possibly 400 British pounds if it entered the PAL territories. If those numbers sound outrageous to you, you're not alone. I thought they were pretty bonkers as well.
What the heck?
So I took a dive and quickly discovered why I got the...
Wait, $600? He said 95. What is the inflation for that? I'm going to be looking up the inflation rate for that while this video is going on.
Those numbers. The power of the Japanese yen in 1995 was a total outlier. The year prior marked the first time the US dollar was worth less than 100 yen since the conversion rates began fluctuating in 1971, and it would toe around the 100 yen line for much of the year. And while the British pound stayed above 150 throughout 94, it did drop under that for a couple days in August 93. Come the start of March of 95, those exchange rates cratered to as low as 82 per dollar and 131 per pound respectively. But for the next 6 months, those exchange rates stayed firmly under 90 and 140. It wouldn't go back to what it was until the middle of September. Those 6 months contributed to a year.
Okay. ChatGPT said that it would be approximately $1,242.60 today.
Average of 94 yen to the dollar and 148.
Did that look like something? Did that look like something that you would pay $1,242 for?
A pound respectively. Numbers that wouldn't even be sniffed at until 2009. Anyway, beside the point, the PCFX launched with 3 games. Battle Heat, a full-motion video fighting game, which, yes, does sound ridiculous. Susugyo 2, a classroom life simulator, and Team Innocent, a sci-fi style survival horror game not all unlike Resident Evil before Resident Evil actually existed. Of the 3 launch games, this is easily the best one. The 3 games were all fine and dandy, but what most of those interested in the system were wondering was, where the hell was FX Fighter? Let's just say the lack of that game on release was the least of its problems, as for the next 15 months, the decisions made for it behind the scenes turned a system that was underpowered but had some potential into a complete shit show. First things first, regarding FX Fighter. NEC decided to quietly cancel it. Wait, dude, what the fuck are you doing? This was the game that was getting the PCFX its well-needed attention. It'd be like Sony demoing Battle Arena Toshinden at the Tokyo Toy Show and then axing it after the system launched. The second major shakeup was their development and publishing guidelines being produced for the system. Put simply, it was almost mandatory that any game produced for the system required some kind of pre-rendered animation, giving it a quick reputation as an anime machine. While the guidelines did cater to the strengths of the PCFX, a la video playback, this put third parties, and especially Hudson, in a bit of a quandary. For Hudson, the guidelines meant they had to support the PCFX without its best-known franchises. Adventure Island? Negative. Bomberman? Nope, no dice.
Did y'all like Adventure Island? Did y'all ever used to play that? I used to play it back on the Super Nintendo.
Even the original PC Engine mascot in Bonk wasn't big on the system. Instead, the PCFX's mascot was a blue-haired girl named Rolfie, a girl who mostly appeared on the Anime Freak CDs,
Rolfie,
which were essentially magazines in a CD format, though she would eventually get her own game. Regardless, those 2 things hindered the console big time. By the end of 1995, just a year after it launched, only 15 games were available for the system. 15! Fuck, even the Atari Jaguar had more games released in that time span. The audience that had interest in that system, they just didn't care anymore, as it sold less than 100,000
Sorry, my cat
units
is
by the
getting
end of
into
95.
everything.
You can just hear the air raid sirens going off within NEC at this point. They continued to shoot themselves in the foot and then got really desperate. While there were potential hints of this being a thing since the first Anime Freak CD, which released in August of 95, it wasn't until the middle of 96 where NEC went full mask off and opened the floodgates to what resulted in the PCFX's lasting legacy. Now, those that know the PCFX well, myself included, could certainly downplay what I'm about to say. Nothing I say, or anyone else will say to defend this system, will ever change the reputation this console has. It is a stigma that simply won't go away. Alright, you ready for it? Okay. They tried to turn to hentai to get something going on the
Oh
system.
my god.
Yes, really. NEC actually pushed for some eroge to get on the console over the course of PC 98 games. Now, having to
I was not expecting him to say that at all. I don't know what I thought he was gonna say. I didn't expect him to say that at all. That's insane. I might not be able to continue this video depending on what's on the screen next.
as low as turning to hentai to push your product is definitely embarrassing. If you think that's sad, well, that's not actually the sad part. The real sad part was that even that didn't work.
Oh my god.
I'm not even joking. You'd think that would actually do something, but it barely did a thing. I can't even make this shit up. This console was actively turning to adult content, and it was still running the tank. You what? How is that possible? How do you even manage this? What
That
the
dude,
fuck?
that dude's laugh is dude.
If even uncensored anime mountains can't push your product by even
my
a
cat
tiny bit,
and everything.
your
Y'all
product
keep watching
is
this.
getting absolutely steamrolled by the You're Fucked mobile. And that's exactly what happened to the PCFX. The console already had a tough road back when it was announced at the Tokyo Toy Show, at a time where the gaming industry really didn't know where the direction was going. Hell, even in '95, full-motion video games still had their prevalence. The system itself was intended to be upgradable, like, well, a tower PC. There were actually rumors that a 3D graphics generator was in the works.
I got the laser pointer now to keep her occupied.
Around this time, but unfortunately it never came to pass, as well as any other potential options like connecting it to PC 98 computers. Matter of fact, the only peripheral that got out that even did such a thing was a mere memory saving module. While I'm talking about all this, I should also briefly mention the PCFX Game Accelerator, which was a literal expansion card for PC 98 and some DOS computers. Of course, this lets you play PCFX games on every PC.
I'm still tripping off that dude said that hentai couldn't even save.
Not surprisingly, this thing rode the tanks as well. Regardless, this system actually had some potential, and had it released in its original Techigen format back in the summer of '93, we would be telling a very different story. Instead, NEC simply had their heads in the sand, shot themselves in the foot repeatedly, and ultimately sold the console's soul to hentai. While actively having that type of content could have been a potential selling point for the PCFX in some way, shape, or form, it wasn't even unique in taking that direction. The 3DO and Sega Saturn were offering the same exact thing. Matter of fact, if I'm looking at this right, the 3DO was the last home console to feature adult content in North America, since the ESRB would put a stop to that after it formed in late '94. As for the Sega Saturn, those that know their imports real well could recognize the system's rating labels. Most games feature this green label, which indicates all ages. If you go real deep into it, you may come across the yellow label, which is essentially the equivalent of the ESRB's M rating, PAL Region's 16 rating, or Japan's current rating system being D. And then even deeper than that, you've got the red label, which of course is the equivalent of the adults only 18 and Z ratings. The Sega Saturn mostly censors its naughty content to a considerable degree, even if they were PCFX games that got ported onto the system later on. As a result, very few games actually got the red label. Wait a minute, Atlas Pulse this game? What the fuck? As you might expect, the red label games all feature uncensored nudity, except for one, which surprisingly is Mortal Kombat 2. So while the 3DO was all but discontinued by the middle of 1996, the Saturn was still going strong, and for the weirdos who thought this type of content was in their alley...
Oh, now my other cat woke up. So if y'all hear some fighting, you know, cats play fighting in the background or something, please forgive me. You know what I'm saying? If you're a cat owner, you know you know.
They either stuck to their home computers or bought a Saturn, especially since some PCFX games would get on the system anyway. By this point, just about zero fucks were given for the PCFX. It continued to ride the tanks throughout 1996, and by the middle of 1997, it was clear to both NEC and Hudson that the writing was on the wall. At the end of February 1998, NEC announced the discontinuation of the PCFX after just over 3 years on the market. The final game released for the system was First Kiss Story, released on the 24th of April 1998, bringing the PCFX's final software library total to 62 in 1998.
Look, the way that it's lined up is like the game cover and the girl in the background are like almost one and the same. Maybe I'm just tired.
Bringing the PCFX's final software library total to 62. And that was it, not just for the intended successor to the PC Engine, but also the relationship between NEC and Hudson, as well as the former's position in the console industry. For NEC, they would continue producing PC-98 computers until the end of October 2003. They're still around today, having celebrated their 125th anniversary of operation on the 17th of July this year. However, their prevalence isn't exactly as obvious as it was back in the 90s. Nowadays, they focus on telecommunications and server infrastructure. As for Hudson Soft, they would continue making games as a third-party company while slowly being absorbed by Konami until finally merging with them in 2012. As a result, Konami technically has the rights to PCFX content. So if you ever wondered why the TurboGrafx never had a successor console, well, you got your answer here. They actually did. But it was the equivalent of a nuclear bomb going off in the middle of God's nowhere in the Pacific, a sight seen only by few. Now, in terms of unit sales over the course of its 3-year run, it's not exactly concrete how many units got sold during that time span. Some sources simply put the units sold claim at just 100,000 and was done with it, maybe as high as 110, maybe 120,000. One source puts it as high as 300,000, but the absolute maximum claimed in terms of units sold is no higher than 400,000. No matter what the number is, that is horrendous. In a lot of ways, this system is actually comparable to the Atari Jaguar. Both systems were intended for release in late 1992, but got pushed back due to issues.
I wonder which sold more, that or the Virtual Boy.
Systems looked underpowered compared to the 3DO of all things. Both parent companies mismanaged the hell out of these systems over their first year in production. Both consoles have at least one embarrassing moment regarding their higher-ups. For NEC's case, it was turning to hentai, while Jaguar's case was the infamous Next Generation interview. Both consoles couldn't crack 70 games in their entire library, couldn't sell even 500,000 units, crashed and burned after just over 3 years on the market, and ultimately was the last major console for both companies.
But let's be for real here. The Jaguar is a much better looking console than this, okay? So if we just going off of that alone and the name of the console, we'll give it to Jaguar.
Just how closely these two failures are tied to the hip is staggering. Even though the Atari Jaguar does get mentioned on occasion, considering the system tanked as hard as it did and remained a Japanese exclusive, maybe it's not all that surprising to know that just about everybody forgot this system ever existed. However, failure this console may be, it should not be a system that is forgotten, for a really good reason. The PCFX is a fantastic period piece of what was one of the strangest periods in video game history. Back then, nobody really knew what the direction of the 5th generation was going to be. Was the future going to be full motion video or 3D polygons? NEC and Hudson simply bet on the wrong horse. If the PCFX had released in the middle of '93, we may have been telling a bit of a different story. Alas, it is what it is. Alright, you've heard me ramble like a madman about this console, its history, and its reputation. You've probably had this question on your mind for quite a while now. Is there anything on the PCFX actually interesting? Okay, I'm going to admit right out of the gate, because this system is an obscure Japanese exclusive, approaching it isn't all that easy. The majority of its library consists of RPGs and visual novels, two genres that rely heavily on text. If you don't have a firm grasp of Japanese, getting through these games is agony incarnate. Adding on to this, out of the 62 titles that comprise the PCFX's library, only 4 have had fan translations of any kind published, the most recent being Farland Story FX in March 2021. If you can get past that, there are a couple neat titles, such as an enhanced version of Langrisser 2 and Miraculum. For those that did give the PCFX a try, it's almost universally known for 3 games in particular. First is Chip-Shot Kick, an arcade-style game that is very similar to Bubble Bobble, more specifically Parasol.
It looks like,
though the less I say about its animated sections, the better. Joujin Heiki Zeragar, which, while the PC Engine is known for being a shoot-'em-up haven,
the cover of that game looks super cool.
The only one for the PCFX in a cruel twist of irony. It's also one of the 4 games to get an English translation, and the only one of those 4 to get the full treatment and subtitles in its animated sequences. And finally, you have Kishin Doji Zenki FX Vajra Fight. Yeah,
I was about to say, that's a long name.
A 2D beat-em-up that has had some comparisons to Guardian Heroes on the Sega Saturn. I might come back to these games as independent videos. After all, my main focus for this one was the console itself. The point is, there is stuff here on the PCFX. Just like every other game console, you just have to give it a chance, take a dive, and eventually you might find something. Though, considering this console was a Japanese exclusive, it's definitely not going to be for everyone. I'll admit that at least. While the PCFX was indeed a total bust, it still is a novelty piece of an interesting age in the industry. No matter what your view of the console is, whether it be an ill-fated system that was brutally fucked over by NEC's decisions, an abomination of a console that should never have existed to begin with, or simply the hentai console, I think you and I can both agree on one thing. The NEC PCFX is without a doubt one of the game consoles of all time.
He said, "Is one of the game consoles of all time. Not one of the best, not one of the worst. One of the consoles." All right, yo. That was good. Yo, shout outs to him. Make sure y'all go like and subscribe to his channel. Okay, so next up, we got when South Park targeted Pokemon.
Agreed upon by South Park fans that the first 3 seasons don't hold up to the rest of the show. Of course, there will always be people who disagree with that, but even the show's creators themselves claim this era of South Park to be subpar. There is, however, one episode that stands out from the rest. A diamond in the rough, if you will. One episode that was so good, it made it into the top 15 fan favorite list, and is also the only episode from this era to crack IMDb's top 35 episodes. You can't have South Park without a little bit of controversy, so you will probably not be surprised to hear that this episode was banned by an entire country. Today, we'll be exploring South Park Season 3 episode, Chin Pokemon.
I remember this.
What made this episode so good? Why exactly was it banned in Japan? Is Pokemon a Japanese government plan to brainwash kids?
The American government lies to you. Join the fight for Japanese supremacy of the world.
Okay, probably not, but it is a hilarious concept. All jokes aside, this episode came out at the perfect time, right in the middle of the era known as Pokemania. Okay, what the hell is Pokemania? As we know, Japan has a knack for creating legendary media, usually in the form of animation and video games.
I'll tell you what Pokemania was because I was there. Some of you young bucks wasn't there, but I was there. You feel me? I'm trying to think of anything that I can compare it to. Pokemon was if Fortnite, Bluey, I can't think of anything else from this generation. Fortnite and Bluey, Fortnite and Bluey, Fortnite and Bluey times 100 got together, made a baby, and it was Pokemon. That's how big Pokemon was. Okay, I can't think of anything. I'm sorry.
However, Pokemon was something different, something truly special. When Pokemon was exported to the rest of the world in 1998, it immediately became a global phenomenon.
I remember where I was when I saw the first episode of Pokemon. I was sitting in my grandma's kitchen. It was 6:30 in the morning. I was eating breakfast, about to get on the bus. And that is when I saw Ash wake up late to go to Professor Oak's and then end up getting a Pikachu. I remember that. I remember that dag near more than I remember graduating high school.
Pokemania is considered the peak years of its explosion in popularity, running from 1998 until around the end of 2002. Your boy here got to experience the latter years of this. The first video game I ever owned was Pokemon Yellow. Yes, I am old enough to remember that you couldn't even play it at night unless you had one of these bad boys. This was the peak of gaming, lads. And yeah, I was basically the South Park kids during this time, completely brainwashed by this franchise, which makes me feel qualified to analyze this episode. Before we get started, do me a solid and check if you're subscribed. I always thought YouTubers were BSing about the 90% of people aren't subscribed analytics.
This would be a good time to tell you all to please subscribe. I am on my journey to 1,000 subscribers. So if you haven't already, please subscribe. that goes to you 3 people watching.
But then I started making videos, and I realized it's true.
And thank you 3 people watching who are watching. I appreciate y'all for real, from the bottom of my heart.
Anyways, let's get started. The episode begins with Eric Cartman watching TV and eating a light 2,000 calorie snack.
Now, Kenny, these are my spicy hot Louisiana baked chicken tenders.
He's watching the new Japanese TV show titled Chin Pokemon. We obviously know this is a parody of Pokemon, but what exactly does this translate to? Well, Chinpoko in Japanese means penis.
Oh my
God.
God.
Mon is short for monsters. So it's basically penis monsters as opposed to pocket monsters, which was the original name of the franchise.
Oh my.
It wasn't until it was exported that they made it Pokemon for the rest of the world. When you watch South Park, you'll notice Japanese a lot more than other languages, and it's usually correct Japanese as well. Sometimes it's been changed for comedic effect, but the accuracy compared to other languages is because Trey Parker actually double majored in film and Japanese.
Oh, wow.
While Matt's majors were film and mathematics, because Trey needed...
Because we needed you to do the bookkeeping.
Not long after the show ends, he sees an ad for Chinpokemon dolls. He's able to easily manipulate his mom to take him to the store to buy some.
But, Mom, I have to get the Pokemon doll before everybody else does, because then I'll be cute.
His urgency to get the dolls is so that he can be the first one at school to show off his new toys. But upon arriving there, Cartman is angered to see
Look at that
everyone
fake
else
Pikachu.
also saw the ad and even got there before him. Stan shows off his new collection, including the Chinpokemon shoe. This might seem like the most exaggerated joke ever about how sometimes Game Freak can lack creativity with Pokemon, but over the years, they have had ideas about as ridiculous as a shoe. From ice cream cones, cogwheels, keychains. Yeah, these are all real Pokemon. When their moms ask about the origin...
I hate to be that type saying my generation was the best. But, I mean, the first generation is classic. I mean, you have some stupid Pokemon like, Diglett and Dig Trio and stuff, but, I mean, come on now. Car keys? Really?
Of Chinpokemon, they're told it's some new big thing from Japan. He goes on to say that the Japanese really know how to market to children. I tried to find some old Japanese commercials on Pokemon, and the earliest one I found from the original game's release was... Strange, to say the least. It didn't really feel like a kid's commercial at all, but then again, I'm not a marketing expert, so we'll leave it at that. The next day at the bus stop, Cartman tries to get Kenny to trade his Penguin doll, claiming that it's his favorite. You know, trading is actually a massive part of the success of Pokemon. You couldn't even fully complete a Pokemon game unless you were able to trade.
Oh, check it out. So, when Pokemon was popping, right, and they had Pokemon cards, well, they still have Pokemon cards, obviously, but when they came out with the starter pack, I had the holographic McChamp, and my dad was like, whatever you do, Demetrius, do not trade this card. It's going to be worth a lot of money or something. Man, I had so many kids offer me, well, not so many, but I had like a kid offer me a holographic Charizard. And just because I wanted to obey my dad, I did not trade it. Like, you should listen to your parents, but sometimes parents don't know what they're talking about.
The versions locked certain Pokemon from ever being found, basically forcing you to either have friends who played or to buy both copies of a generation. Oh yeah, and if you wanted to trade, you also had to buy an attachment that doesn't come with the game. Get owned.
Yo, they should have link cable ports for the emulation handhelds. That would be cold. That would be sick.
kid, this is the most blatantly obvious form of manipulation that Game Freak still uses today, as there's always going to be people who buy both versions. Think about how much extra money they have made by getting people to buy both copies of basically the same game. Oh yeah, and on top of that, let's repackage the same game a year later, add maybe 10% more content, and call it something shinier. Yeah, these are things I didn't pay much attention to as a kid, but as an adult, you realize they milked every possible dollar they could.
The most genius thing ever, actually, if you want to steal money from kids.
Kyle arrives at...
That's one of the things I love about the Legends series is that you're not buying 2 copies of the same game.
Bus stop to show off his sweet new cyborg Bill doll. The boys give him a hard time and laugh, saying that it's all about Chinpokomon now. He then rushes home to beg his parents for money to buy Chinpokomon when his dad gives him a pretty good speech about how he shouldn't blindly follow fads.
In fact, you can make an even stronger statement by saying to your peers, I'm not going to be a part of this fad.
Kyle explains how in the real world, it doesn't work like that.
In the real world, I can either get a Chinpokomon, or I can be the only kid without one, which singles me out and causes the other kids to make fun of me and kick my ass.
Yeah, Kyle can be pretty smart sometimes. After buying his new doll, the store owner says he doesn't understand what kids see in these things, and Kyle agrees, showing that he really only cares about keeping with the fads to fit in. Before the store owner leaves, he starts messing with one of the toys, and he hears,
Down with America and destroy the capitalist American government.
I forgot about
oh
this.
yeah, now we're getting to some plot. Kyle is eager to show off his new toy, but the boys seem to no longer care because they're now into the Chinpokomon video games, showing that there are even fads within a fad. The video game they're playing has an interesting moment.
I've got to buy them all, so first I'd better go to Hawaii and visit Pearl Harbor.
So yeah, this is reason number one
gosh.
on why Japan had this episode banned.
Oh my
There has
god.
to be some kind of plot to take Pearl Harbor again, because you know they want it.
The toy store owner takes the Chinpokomon doll to headquarters to complain about its
I might have
anti-American
to stop this video. This thing gonna get me demonetized before I'm monetized.
sayings. And we meet for the first time Emperor Hirohito. Example number 2 of why this episode was banned. They decided to use the name of the famous emperor who ruled from 1926
God.
until his death in 1989.
South Park does so much history. You know, they do not just put out episodes. It makes me think about that episode on Scientology where they kept showing like everything is true. This is all true.
That's a very big penis.
What if I told you the penis size joke was inspired by a real life experience that Matt and Trey had?
And we were out at a bar one night, and he was saying, "Oh, American penis so big," and we were just like, "Yeah, okay, cool." And he was like, "My penis is small."
Another cool thing about this is that Hirohito was voiced by Junichi Nishimura, a college roommate of Trey Parker's who actually was learning English while Trey was learning Japanese. Trey also had him narrate one of his first animated shorts that he made in college called American History, thinking that someone with a strong Japanese accent talking about American history was pretty funny.
Thank you for stopping by with your gargantuan penis.
Oh my
Dame. Dame da.
He realizes people are onto his plan, and we get shown that Chinpokomon toys are indeed chipped. We are then revealed with his true intentions.
The time has come. We will take Pearl Harbor.
The next scene shows Randy and Sharon watching Chinpokomon, trying to decide if it's appropriate for children to watch. You know, I actually had a friend in elementary school whose parents didn't let him play or watch Pokemon because it challenged the powers of God. I'm amazed he didn't grow up to become a serial.
I'm a Christian, and my aunt, you know, she used to say growing up that Pokemon was the devil or whatever, but I can never understand why people thought that about Pokemon. And I asked her about that as an adult. I grew up, I said, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "I don't know."
Serial killer with parents like that. The conclusion they come to is that
Oh, it's not like it's vulgar or violent.
No, but it's incredibly stupid, and that can be worse on a
Is that a fake Meowth?
child's mind than any vulgarity or violence.
Kyle shows up with his new controller for the Chinpokomon games. But of course, the boys have moved on from that. Oh yeah, Kenny had a seizure playing the game. That's why his eyes look like that. That reminds me. It's
Yo,
likely
Kenny
that
is
this
that.
is inspired by a real life event that actually happened. In
I remember that.
1997, Japan was airing a new episode of the Pokemon anime. 20 minutes into the episode, Pikachu stops missiles with his Thunderbolt attack, resulting in an explosion that rapidly flashes red and blue lights. A lot of viewers reported blurred vision, headaches, dizziness, nausea. Some of them even had seizures.
I remember when that happened. And I think I remember hearing about it on the news before I actually heard about Pokemon. I could be mixing that up in my head, but I don't think I had heard about Pokemon when I heard about this Japanese cartoon uh causing people to have seizures. My timeline might be messed up though.
Over 600 Japanese children were taken to hospitals. Many of them recovered on the way though. But anyways, they go on to say that the new cool thing is the Pokemon Camp that is being held to teach trainers how to defeat the evil power.
Putting on a special camp to show all the Chinpoco masters how to destroy the evil power.
Their parents have a meeting to decide if they're going to let their kids attend this Pokemon Camp. The conclusion they come to is the more they forbid their kids to play Pokemon, the more it'll make them want to do it. So they decide to just let Pokemon run its course, with the idea that Pokemon is just a fad. This is actually how Matt and Trey felt, and something they were completely wrong about. In the real world, Pokemon is the highest grossing media franchise of all time. It's funny because it's not even remotely just for kids anymore. Pokemon has an audience of pretty much all ages. Sure, the explosion of popularity was 95% children and preteens back in the day, but those kids have grown up, and plenty of them still love Pokemon, which I think is pretty sick. I mean, we have full-grown adults making a living off of playing Pokemon now. That's no shade, by the way. If I knew this was possible at age 8, I would have definitely pursued this career path. The kids show up to the Pokemon camp very excited, and they are finally asked the question, what is the evil power?
The evil power is the United States government!
Oh my gosh.
We then get a propaganda speech from Hirohito that none of the kids even understand. But the brainwashing has begun.
It's me, Sanchi!
It's me, Sanchi!
We get a hilarious scene of the kids in the classroom all speaking Japanese and acting like anime characters.
Ooh, Gasen-san sabushi da na.
What did he say?
He said, Gasen-san sabushi da na.
Not so fun fact, this is the last episode where Mary Kay Bergman voiced Wendy Testaburger. She tragically passed away a little over a week after this episode aired. Rest in peace to a legend. The adults of South over a week after this episode aired. Rest in peace.
Who all voices did she do? Dang, that's a lot of voices. She was Miss Buttersworth. Oh, snap. She was like dag near every female character on South Park, it looks like. She is Batgirl. Wow, she was a lot of people.
Peace to a legend. The adults of South Park have had enough and go to see the mayor.
I tell you, Mayor, these Japanese are trying to change our American children somehow.
The mayor actually brought Hirohito and his right hand to explain themselves.
You Americans have such humongous bulbous penis.
Well, I guess that's true.
Except, instead of explaining things, they once again use their flattery to compliment the American penis size.
You see, Japanese penis so small.
So small.
All right, y'all. Okay, I can't take it anymore. Okay. All right, let's go on to another video. Okay. So, if you want to finish that video up, it is by Armchair Analysis is the name of that channel. Okay. But I can't hear about the American penis anymore. I'm sorry. All right. So this video is by Top Hat Gaming. It is this video is by Top Hat Gaming. It is the lost NES Power Rangers they stole from us. And this could be the last video I'm doing for the night, y'all. All right, let's get it.
Aired on Western shores, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was a cultural phenomenon, a kaleidoscope of colour, action and energy that captivated a generation. I and many other children everywhere were glued to our screens, mimicking martial arts moves in our living rooms and debating endlessly over who got to be the Green Ranger during playground battles. As with any franchise that captivates kids on this scale, it naturally sparked an avalanche of merchandise, and of course a wave of video games. This slew of titles would become available
Have y'all played the new Power Rangers? If so, let me know. I haven't played it yet.
as of Christmas 1994.
But I love the Power Rangers. Check this out. Wait, let me get out the way. Look at that right there. Look at that. Can y'all see it? I'm trying to point, but it's backwards. And there we go. See the Power Rangers on the wall? Maybe y'all can see it. I don't know.
So they were released on 16-bit game consoles and their accompanying 8-bit handhelds. What's particularly intriguing though is that by Christmas 1993, Power Rangers was already a massive phenomenon in the United States. So with no game released that year, you'd think it took a bit of time to cook up games to cash in on the craze. But one would be mistaken. The Japanese Famicom already had a game featuring these iconic costume-clad heroes. It baffles me that this game never made it to the West, especially considering how popular both the NES and Power Rangers were in the US. It's a mystery why this potential gold mine remained confined to the land of the rising sun.
I gotta find the name of this game and download the ROM. Like for real, for real.
Mystery why this potential gold mine remained confined to the land of the rising sun. So holding such thoughts in mind, join me today as we look back at this title, delve into its curious...
Shout outs to Top Hat Gaming, man. Go subscribe. Man, his channel's so dope.
...place in history, look at its gameplay, and uncover what exactly it was that we missed out on. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is the bizarre tale of...
I wonder if this, he's about to say it right now, but I wonder if this game was actually Power Rangers or if it was the Japanese show that Power Rangers pulled footage from.
Mighty Morphin Power Rangers for NES. Yeah. For many, the NES in 1993 was like an old friend who'd been with you through thick and thin, a gateway to some of the happiest, simplest moments of childhood. While no longer the king of the gaming hill, it still easily had its place in the hearts of gamers, with new releases continuing to hit store shelves. Many may have upgraded to 16-bit hardware, but many kids still had their NES plugged into the second TV or tucked away in a bedroom, ready to fire up after homework. For others, it was the system they just inherited from an older sibling or cousin, sparking a love for gaming that remains to this day. What I'm trying to reinforce to you here is the NES was kind of a big deal, and this platform was still very much relevant, with smash hits like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, The Manhattan Project, and Kirby's Adventure making it to market that same year. The situation was clear, the NES wasn't going down without a fight, and these late gems proved the hardware had more life in it than many expected, delivering unforgettable experiences even as the gaming world moved on. And do you know what would have been the icing on the cake during this time? The Western release of a game that frustratingly actually existed elsewhere. One which, in my...
Those sprites look so good, man. Like, those sprites are so huge. I really want this game.
opinion, could have easily been the best-selling game on the platform that year. In fact, as a packing game, this could have probably even shifted a few more consoles as well. Just imagine it, the NES receiving a Power Rangers game. It would have felt like the perfect swan song for the system, going out on a massive commercial high, similar to how Pokemon gave the Game Boy the perfect send-off. It's an absolute travesty that this never happened. It's one of those what-ifs that could have drastically changed history as we know it. After all, people still talk about the Turtles games from this era, even though the original NES game is considered by many to be kind of jank. Still, no matter what you think of that game's quality, there is no question that it helped shift consoles, but my heart will always be with the arcade beat-em-ups. Speaking of these games, how freaking good is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge? What a fantastic brawler! If you haven't had the chance to play it, I've got a fantastic opportunity for you to try it at a great price. By using my affiliate link, you can snag an incredible 50% off this must-play game. But that's not all. My link's in the pinned comment too. So this video. As you likely already knew, in the early days, all costumed fight scenes in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers were lifted straight out of a Japanese-produced Super Sentai. Or more specifically, in 1993, all came from Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger, a Japanese series that had already done all the cool stuff.
Yeah.
The American crew just spliced in some high school drama, a few
That's what I mentioned earlier.
poorly synchronized lines, and presto, instant cultural phenomenon. It was like reheating leftovers and calling yourself a gourmet chef. After all, why choreograph your own Megazord battles when you can just reuse some Japanese ones and call it a day?
Yo,
Angel Grove
I'm
might
gonna
have
go.
looked suspiciously
I'm gonna go grab something to show y'all.
different
You
every
watch it.
time they suited up, but it was all part of the charm. But hey, everyone knows this, right? Of course you did. It's just nice to remind ourselves how brilliantly lazy but also kind of genius this whole thing really was. But one thing we should additionally remind ourselves of is that Super Sentai had existed in Japan way before 1993. This explains why a Zoo Ranger game existed
Got the Megazord right here.
on the Famicom in 1992, featuring
Yeah.
all the costumes
Me and Megazord are gonna watch some of this.
as well as notorious villains from the show, way before the Power Rangers ever existed. What's even crazier is that the original Super Sentai series first aired way back in 1975, an astonishing 18 years before these costume heroes appeared in the West. And here's the real twist. The suits many of us grew up with seeing weren't from the first generation of heroes, but actually the 16th. So while we perceived this iconic lineup to be the first Rangers, we were fed a massive lie as children, as there was an entire 18-year back catalogue of content and older costumes that they hid away from us all. I think if I had have known this in the 90s, my brain would have melted from the sheer shock of it all.
Dude, my brain's melting right now. Where can I find this stuff?
Discovering that the original heroes you idolized were actually latecomers in a much larger legacy. It would be like finding out your favorite band has been releasing albums for decades before the one you thought was their debut. The idea of all these earlier teams, each with unique themes and adventures, existing in secrecy from Western audiences, feels almost like uncovering a secret vault of lost treasure.
Where can I find these videos? If you know, let me know so that I can check it out.
And the
And I will do reviews for you all on how it is.
game that is the centerpiece of today's topic is very much part of this legacy. On the subject of this game that was deprived from the West, since Super Sentai had existed in Japan for nearly 2 decades, this was not even the first Super Sentai game on the Famicom either.
What?
That honor instead goes to Chikyu Sentai 5 Manu, based on the 14th series of the franchise. It was a side-scrolling action game with basic...
This is blowing my mind. It's almost low-key giving me a headache. I'm not gonna lie.
...combat mechanics, which I might cover in the future. But of course today we are focused on the depiction of these heroes we are all nostalgic for. Bringing us to Kyoryu Sentai Zoo Ranger, and this team's accompanying video game. Zoo Ranger, which aired in Japan from 1992 to 1993, was moderately successful, but not a standout hit compared to other entries in the Super Sentai franchise. This show was nothing new to the Japanese. It adhered to the familiar formula of costumed heroes, battling monsters and piloting giant mechas. While it was well received by fans of the genre, it wasn't particularly groundbreaking, with other generations of the show overshadowing Zoo Ranger in cultural significance. This meant that merchandising tied to the show, such as toys, mega figures, and of course the video game, performed steadily, but did not reach exceptional sales levels. In fact, the difference in popularity between Zoo Ranger in Japan and Power Rangers in the West is remarkable. While this game could easily have been a commercial hit in the
That's
United
because Japan was spoiled with dope stuff, man. Like they been had mechas and all of that stuff. It's just new to us, man. We just get everything late.
States. In Japan, it simply represented another entry in a genre that felt routine. Spandex-clad heroes battling rubber-suited monsters, a staple of Japanese pop culture. A standard thing in a region like Tokyo, where Godzilla attacks your city every single day. There is no question that this content blended into the background. This, to me, makes it all the more baffling that no apparent effort was made to bring the game to the US, where it might have found a much more enthusiastic audience. But just because it sold well, is no indication as to whether the game is actually good. So let's discuss the gameplay itself. Just like its predecessor on the hardware, Sentai Zoo Ranger is a side-scrolling action game. This title was developed by a respected studio Arc System Works and published by Angel, a subsidiary of Bandai. Much like the 16-bit games we enjoyed in the West, this 8-bit game's title screen features a rendition of the show's theme melody. However, due to the limitations of the Famicom's hardware, there are no lyrics accompanying the tune this time. But thankfully, at least later, James Rolfe added his own vocals to the 8-bit track.
Angry console game.
Prior to each stage, we also get scenes with written dialogue to help set the scene, all of which have been translated into English by fans, aiding us in following the story's very simple premise. The main action is divided into 5 stages, each featuring one of the Zoo Rangers
Have
as
to
playable
get
characters.
this.
Stage 1 highlights Tiger Ranger, aka Boy.
Before I go to sleep, I am downloading this some way, somehow.
In a jungle setting. Stage 2 follows the Terra Ranger, aka Mai, through a windy mountain region. Stage 3 follows on Tricera Ranger, aka Dan, in dark underground caverns. Stage 4 features Mammoth Ranger, aka Goshi, in a treacherous ice tundra, and Stage 5 climaxes with Tyranno Ranger, aka Geeky, navigating Witch Pandora's magical palace, a character who you will recognise as being positioned as Rita Repulsa in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. The goal is to navigate these themed environments, defeat enemies, and confront a boss at the end of each level. Players start with a standard weapon, the Ranger Gun, which can be upgraded to each Zoo Ranger's legendary weapon by locating rooms via doorways on the stage. Adding to the premise, collectibles such as coins are scattered throughout the stages, and when 10 are gathered, these restore the player's health and provide a visual reward in the form of an image and description of the character's mecha. I must comment that, to me at least, it seems like a really odd choice to make Zoo Ranger a side-scrolling platformer, rather than the more logical route such as making it a beat-em-up or versus fighter, genres that seem better suited to the action-packed fighting spirit of the show.
Yeah, but it still look dope. I ain't gonna hold you.
The series thrives on dynamic team combat, flashy martial arts, and dramatic one-on-one battles with iconic villains, elements that could have been better captured in a beat-em-up like Double Dragon or a fighter akin to Street Fighter 2. Much like the games that arrived after the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers craze had started in the West. A platformer by comparison feels like a bit of a constrained choice, considering the franchise was known for its larger-than-life action. One can only assume that this decision may have been influenced by the Famicom's limitations, or the popularity of platformers at the time, as they were easier to develop and appeal to a broader audience. I suppose that while Street Fighter was a mainstream hit, so was Super Mario and Sonic the Hedgehog, so what do I know? Even the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game for the NES was a side-scrolling platformer, so maybe developers believed this was the genre kids really wanted at the time. Platformers were the bread and butter of the gaming industry in the early 90s, easy to pick up and market.
What would you say is today's platformer? What's the platformer of our day and age? Like, you know, how Mario and Sonic were examples for the 90s. What would you say is the definitive platformer for this generation?
To a wide audience. Still, it feels a bit peculiar, almost comical, that Zoo Ranger opens with us controlling Power Rangers punching snakes in the forest. Where are the putty patrollers or Pandora's more threatening monsters? It's a strange choice to pit our brightly costumed heroes against random wildlife, which feels more like filler than a proper extension of the show's high-stake battles. If anything, it underscores how mismatched the side-scrolling platformer genre can be for a franchise that's all about martial arts action and defeating fantastical villains. The mind boggles. While we can mock this lack of faithfulness to the source material, in other areas the game effectively captures the essence of a TV series, especially regarding the lineup of playable characters. Apart from the game making us play a stage as each of the 5 Zoo Rangers, another highlight are the unique characters' abilities, in that each can unlock their own legendary weapon from the show, providing a stronger link to the series lore. Each stage also includes, as mentioned, boss battles against iconic villains from the TV show, which is a nice touch. But sadly, these aren't the monsters of the week like in the show itself, but instead Pandora's entourage of minions who serve her in her palace. This to me is a tad odd, As usually in the show, not only do most of these characters never engage in direct combat with the Rangers, but they are not even depicted as physical threats. Instead, they are portrayed as schemers, comic relief or background figures who support the witch's plans rather than...
Nah, they said we getting down, okay? They said we ain't finna make you laugh. We finna make your jaw broke.
taking on the Rangers directly. Characters like Squat and Babu, known as Bookback and Totpat in Japan, for instance, are more about mischief and assisting Bandora than engaging in actual fights. This makes their roles as stage bosses feel somewhat out of character and diminishes the opportunity to showcase the show's memorable Monster of a Week format, which was a hallmark of Zoo Ranger storytelling. In fact, it makes me question whether the developers ever saw any footage from the show at all, but are instead working with images for reference. This design choice is a strange one to say the least. As for the mechanics behind these boss battles themselves, they function okay and are nothing to complain about.
Yo, how are they moving though? How are they moving? This is just like a JPEG just going sideways.
But at the same time, they're nothing to get excited about. Sadly, I can't say the same for the side-scrolling elements of the game though. The platforming in this one is plagued by issues that undermine its quality, the most glaring being clunky controls. Movement feels sluggish and unresponsive at times, making it difficult to time jumps or react to hazards effectively as I would like. This lack of precision often leads to frustrating moments where it's easy to overshoot platforms or fall short, especially in sections that demand quick reflexes or tight maneuvering. Another issue is the level design, which isn't exactly inspiring. The stages rely on basic layouts and repetitive hazards, such as pits and moving platforms that fail to evolve or present new challenges as the game progresses. This lack of variety makes the platforming feel bland and unmemorable, missing the opportunity to engage us with creative or dynamic sequences. Compounding this problem is the poor collision detection, which can lead to moments of unfair damage or missed jumps that feel undeserved. The game also fails to explore platforming variety, offering no unique mechanics like wall jumps, moving puzzles, or environmental interactions that add depth. This simplicity makes the platforming feel like an afterthought rather than a core element of the gameplay.
Yo, how the platforming gonna be an afterthought on a platformer game?
Additionally, the placement of enemies exacerbates these problems. Enemies are often positioned near platforms or in tight spaces, making it difficult to navigate without taking damage. Combined with the dubious controls, these encounters can often feel more frustrating than they are genuinely challenging. But perhaps most annoyingly of all is the off-screen environmental hazards and enemies, with it often being required to make leaps of faith to make any progress. What makes this worse is I often found myself landing on spikes or enemies that hurt my ranger, which is incredibly unfair considering the game provides you with no signposting to know that this is coming. These hazards are often positioned in ways that force players to take damage unless they've memorized the level layout through trial and error. This design choice disrupts the flow of the game and diminishes the sense of accomplishment that should come from skill-based platforming. It's a bit disgraceful, really. Sadly, despite the game's giant robot battles being a core feature of the show in both the East and the West, the game doesn't allow players to engage in combat using the Zords. There are no epic mecha showdowns at the end of any stages, which is a disappointing omission for fans who would have loved to pilot their favourite Zords in battle. But at least we have the Green Ranger in this one.
Oh,
well,
snap.
kind of anyway.
Oh.
The resident edgelord known as the Dragon Ranger in Japan reappears as the classic bad boy turned ally. And naturally, he gets a special role in the game, but not the kind of role anyone would have actually wanted. Instead, his grand contribution is hosting a series of mini-games between stages.
Oh my god.
Yes, the most popular character from the entire show is...
Yo, you got your Megazord fight. Were you playing Pong?
A series of mini-games between stages. Yes, the most popular character from the entire
Oh
show
my God.
is reduced to being a glorified carnival barker. Absolutely ridiculous.
Oh my
Amongst
goodness.
the challenges involving him, there's the trivia quiz, where you answer questions about the show. Because nothing screams action-packed adventure like sitting through a multiple-choice questionnaire about which episode Bandora
Yo, I was wanting to download this game, man, but after seeing some of this, I don't know.
did something evil. Then there's the Pong-style game. Yes, Pong, the game from the 1970s. Except this time, it's the Megazord and Dragonzord lazily bouncing a ball at each other.
They literally
Because
in
yeah,
it.
why put something in the game that would have made sense to its fan base when you can have iconic robots having a ping pong match? It's madness. Finally, if that's not for you, we have one final offering. We can play as the Dragonzord and play hot potato against who is known as Scorpina in the West. It's about as thrilling as it sounds, which is to say, not at all. Looking at these mini games, it's as if the developers thought, hey, we've got this cool 6 Ranger everyone loves. What if we just have him host party games instead of doing anything remotely heroic?
Oh my.
Truly a missed opportunity for the ages. But considering how much I've poked fun at this one, was it truly a missed opportunity not releasing this one in the West? Well, personally, I still think so. Sure, it's rough around the edges and it could have been a lot better, but there's a certain charm to it that fans of Mighty Morphin...
And then it would also done well because we're spoiled because we're looking at everything from hindsight and we're just knowing like you said earlier, as far as, you know, why not make it a beat 'em up? Well, beat 'em ups weren't really a thing back then. I don't think. Maybe. Yeah, I guess they kind of were. But yeah, they would have made a lot of money, that's for sure.
Power Rangers would have appreciated. The game captures enough of a show's essence, however clumsily, to appeal to kids who were swept up in the Power Rangers craze of the early 90s. The novelty of controlling their favourite Rangers and fighting recognisable villains would have been enough to sell copies, even if the gameplay didn't live up to the standards of some other releases. Besides, let's be honest, rough, licensed games weren't exactly rare back then. If Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the NES could frustrate players with its swimming levels and still become a classic, this game could have carved out its niche too. After all, in the early 90s, anything with a tie to a popular franchise practically sold itself. So yes, it is a missed opportunity. If nothing else, releasing this game in the West could have ridden the Power Rangers hype train to decent success. And let's face it, we've all played worse games than this and still managed to have fun. It may not have been groundbreaking, but it had enough going for it to become a nostalgic footnote for a generation of kids obsessed with Morphin Time. Because the truth is, sometimes all a game needs is a little spandex, some flashy moves, and a catchy theme song to become a childhood classic. This one might not be spectacular, but don't forget Shredder's Revenge is. Use my affiliate link and you can grab this game at an incredible 50% off on these.
Alright, yo. So that was dope. I appreciate y'all watching. Those of you all who stuck around for the whole time and those of you all who watched a little bit and dipped out. This is my first live, so I appreciate you all joining me. Thankfully, I didn't have too many technical errors. The only thing that seemed to go kind of crazy was my cat continuously trying to get these wires. All right, y'all. God bless. Love y'all. And salutations to the nations. Peace.